Welcome back in. Our friend Mike Baker joins, my brother from the agency, Mr. Mike Baker. He is the host of the PDB podcast, as in like Presidential Daily Brief. And Mike, appreciate you making the time for us. Congrats on all the success of the PDB podcast. And I've, look, you and I are familiar in a whole range of ways, whether historically or from our time with espionage and sabotage operations around the world, right? I mean, this is neither of us have ever seen, I would assume, anything like this. I mean, this is a first. What do you think about what Israel has pulled off here?
Well, look, first of all, it's setting aside, I'm sure what's going to be lots of international condemnation, about, oh my God, this is, asymmetric warfare. How dare you step outside the norms of, traditional warfare conduct. From an operational perspective, it's very sophisticated, very impressive, regardless of who did it. I mean, again, you always have to caveat this by saying, look, Israel has, provided no comment. And typically
they neither confirm nor deny, but, they also say they don't have nukes. I mean, right, yeah.
Exactly. So, but from a sophistication standpoint, look, you imagine what is involved here. And actually sourcing the contacts who can get you access to the communications gear, both the pagers and the handheld radios, it was a far heavier lift than just the mechanics of installing the explosives and, creating the triggering mechanism for remote operation. So, the work that went up to that point where they actually had access to the gear is extremely impressive. They've done similar operations like this in the past. I think it was 2020 when they remotely took out a Iranian scientist. And there's been other situations. You could even go back to, in a sense, you could go back to Stuxnet, although that was more of a cyber weapon, but there was still sort of an element of physical access there that was required. But yeah, this is an impressive operation. There's no doubt about it.
If you are Hezbollah, and let's pretend that you are on their communications team, which I would imagine is in a rough spot right now. You've just had the pagers. You now have had effectively the walkie-talkies. How in the world are they communicating right now? Are they back to carrier pigeons? Can they trust them? Is it just straight messengers? And more importantly, how much do you think it creates a massive communication issue for them in terms of just their ability to respond?
Yeah, it creates a real logistics issue for them. I think, first and foremost, there's an element here that they're trying to create paranoia. And that's a good thing. When you're dealing with a terrorist organization, or you're dealing with a group that you're targeting, go back to the days of the IRA or current times of cartels, whomever it is, you're trying to create an element of fear that they don't know who they can trust within their own organization at that point. The Iranian regime has felt that recently, right, with some of the operations that have taken place inside Tehran. So that, I think, is a really important component of all of this. From just a strict communication standpoint, look, the irony here, not to make light of this, but the irony is that they were able to target these devices because over the past several months, Hezbollah decided they needed to dumb down their communications approach. So they put out command, most of the fighters, the officials, the leadership groups stopped using cell phones because they started to get indications that those were corrupted by the Israeli services. And so they went to dumb down this, and that's why they were going to pagers, which they've used in the past, but they started to use them more, handheld radios for more communication to try to make things more secure. So where do they go from here? Look, I mean, your next step is kind of what Al-Qaeda used to do when they were really dumbing things down, and it was handwritten notes and personal, face-to-face communication between, okay, you're my cousin, I can trust you. So it slows things down immeasurably.
So when you look at this, what happens next? And wouldn't you imagine, in addition to the communications issues, it's not only what's going on with Hezbollah. Wouldn't you imagine that Hamas is looking around pretty nervous? We know that, Israel's been very effective at trying to slow down Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapon. What do you think those entities are doing? Are they? I would be honest. If I were them, I'd be like, all of our pagers are out. Like, let's get rid of everything, because if they did this to them, we got to source everything and redo our entire communication strategy. Don't you think this likely extends beyond Hezbollah, and everybody who is a foe of Israel right now is basically reconstituting their entire communication networks as well?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up Iran, right? Because this is a top-down structure, and Iran is the puppet master here, and they've created this ring, this network of terror proxies, and they all share the same often stated objective of Iran, which is to remove Israel from the map. So, yes, there is, I guarantee you right now, there is coordination going on between the IRGC liaison that deal with Hamas and Hezbollah, the Houthis, some of the militias that are sitting in Iraq, Islamic Jihad, and they are looking at how they're going to handle their communications, because it doesn't just impact, as you pointed out, it doesn't just impact Hezbollah. They're all backed, financed, trained, resourced by the same group, which is the Iranian regime and the IRGC. So, yeah, this is a big issue for them. Obviously, now they've got to figure out how do they go from here. And again, I go back to the same point, which is part of this operation is undoubtedly designed to create this paranoia within these organizations, and that can sometimes create other opportunities. It creates movement. It creates shifts in protocols and planning and strategy and resources. And so those also open up operational opportunities to take advantage and identify and target individuals and elements of these organizations.
Speaking of Mike Baker, PDB is his podcast, which you can listen wherever you get your podcast. It's doing great. Guy who brings real expertise and time, not just at the agency, but in the scary places, doing the real work to bear on what he's talking about day in and day out. And Mike, I'm just wondering, I don't know, you don't have to confirm or deny if you've been talking to Trump or anybody in his orbit recently about anything, but if you were going to advise who will be our, hopefully, next president of the United States on the way to handle this aspect of Mideast policy, specifically this Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah situation, Iran in the background, and there's this sense that, oh my gosh, it could escalate at any time, more than it already has. What would you tell the next POTUS? What would you tell President Trump if he said, Mike, what do I do to get things squared away?
Well, first they've got to shelf the idea of appeasement with Iran, with this Iranian regime. I'm not talking about the population, of course, or whatever. A lot of the population would love to see the Iranian regime go as well, as would Saudis and the Jordanians and a variety of other players in that region. But I would say you've got to get rid of this concept of appeasement and somehow they're going to join the community of nations. This regime, and the IRGC, which is a extremely influential element of the Iranian government, they've got their hands in everything. And we've got to go back to maximum sanctions. We've done it before, right? You have to literally starve the regime out, right? And does that create hardships for the people? It does. But longer term, does that create opportunity for a better life for those people? By, eventually at some point, this regime gets pushed aside. Hopefully internally, the population finally has had enough. So I think you've got to go back to maximum sanctions. And I think we also, whoever's in charge next needs to understand the danger involved in the deepening relationship between Russia and Iran, because the Iranians aren't providing munitions and drones and other hardware to the Russian-Ukrainian war effort pro bono. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. They're doing it for a reason, and that reason primarily is technology transfer, weapons transfer, and the nuclear and even space technologies areas. So that is a very dangerous thing, because that accelerates the Iranian regime's efforts. And no matter what they're saying, the amounts of enriched uranium that they're currently sitting on, there's just no civilian purpose for that. So they are moving towards their end goal, which is a weapons program. And that has got to be stopped. And there's a lot of players in the region, again, who would like to see that happen as well. They understand that most of the chaos and instability in the region is a result of this current Iranian regime and the IRGC.
40 some odd days until our election here, the 1 year anniversary coming up of the October 7th Hamas attack. What kind of significant odds or analysis would you put on the table here that the Middle East could become the October surprise or a major flashpoint in terms of its ability to impact in some way what's going to be a close American presidential election? Do you think the sides are quiet-ish down the stretch, or do you think this remains a major geopolitical focus that could impact our election as well?
Well, I think, breaking it out into little bits and pieces, like the Iranian regime will, given their druthers, will not do anything that could result in a Trump victory.
They would rather, Iran would like Kamala to be in office. That's fair to say. Israel would like Trump. Would you say that's the general consensus in the Middle East?
Yeah, that's the general feeling, right? And so, if you take that to a somewhat logical course, not to say that the Iranians are on a logic train, but if you did do that, then you would say, okay, they won't do anything drastic between now and the election that could shift things to cause American voters to think, you know what, actually the Iranians are the key to the problems here, and we need somebody strong to deal with them. And, oh, look, we've got a track record of the former president dealing with them in a more forceful, aggressive way. And we've got almost 4 years of the Harris-Biden administration appeasing them. So I think they'll be mindful of that. But look, this problem, we just keep kicking the can down the road. Every time Anthony Blinken or anyone on the U.S. side talks about, well, we just have to have this ceasefire in Gaza in order to have peace, that's nonsense. You're putting lipstick on a pig, because nothing's ever going to change in that region as long as the regime, the Iranians, and their proxies that they've built have the same end goal, which is the destruction of Israel. So that's the problem that has to be dealt with at the top. Just occasional, flare-ups, and then a ceasefire with Hezbollah, a ceasefire with Hamas. Good God, we'll be talking about this, or grandkids will be talking about this.
No doubt. Appreciate the time. Fantastic analysis. He is Mike Baker. We'll talk to you again soon.
Take care, guys. Take care, man. Bye.
Population of Israel on high alert again, anticipating an attack of some type. You just heard us talking about what exactly has been going on in the Middle East. Day in, day out, been that way since October 7th, almost a year ago now, when their country was attacked by Hamas terrorists. The fear of the next attack, understandable. We don't know how it will arrive, but we know that it is at some point coming. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, that's the IFCJ, has been helping to provide as many Israeli citizens as possible with food and medicine for bomb shelter stays that can last for several days. For more than 40 years, the IFCJ has been on the ground in Israel. We need to help them. One solid way to do that through the humanitarian efforts provided by the IFCJ. They're looking for your financial contributions to help their ongoing efforts. Your generous donation today will not only provide a flag symbolizing your support in churchyards across America, but it will also support the fellowship's ongoing emergency efforts in Israel. Israel needs you now. Visit supportifcj.org. That's supportifcj.org.